The phone buzzed for the 17th time. My daughter's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. 2 hours earlier, she had called me an embarrassment and kicked me out of her wedding, the wedding I had just paid $100. 0004. Now, sitting in my car overlooking the glittering venue, I was the one holding the kill switch, and my finger was already on the button. This is the story of how a father's love was pushed to its absolute limit. If you believe respect is a two-way street, stick around to see how this unfolds. The leather of the steering wheel felt cool and smooth under my hands. I'd had this car for 10 years. A reliable Ford that had seen me through countless trips to job sites. Muddy boots on the floor mats. Blueprints spread across the passenger seat. Today, though, it was spotless. I'd spent 2 hours cleaning it myself the day before, vacuuming every last speck of dust, polishing the dashboard until it gleamed. It felt right. A special day required a certain level of effort. I adjusted my tie in the rearview mirror for what must have been the 10th time. It was a silk tie, charcoal gray, a bit more expensive than I'd normally buy. But Olivia had picked it out for me. "You have to look sharp, Dad," she'd said, her voice bright and cheerful over the phone a few weeks ago. "It's a big day." A big day. That was the understatement of the century. On the seat beside me, wrapped in simple, elegant silver paper, was my gift to her. It wasn't a check or some expensive piece of jewelry. I'd already given her more than enough of that. No, this was something different. It was a heavy, leather-bound photo album. Inside, I had carefully arranged 25 years of memories, starting with her first baby picture. A tiny, red-faced thing squinting under the harsh hospital lights. I remember that day like it was etched into my bones. The sterile, antiseptic smell of the hospital. The faint beeping of machines down the hall. My wife, Sarah, had been so weak, but her smile was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. A few days later, that smile was just a memory, and it was just me and this tiny, helpless person. I held Olivia's impossibly small hand, her fingers wrapping around one of my own, and I made a silent promise. I swore I would give her the world. I would build a fortress around her so strong that nothing could ever hurt her, and she would never, ever want for anything. For 25 years, I'd done my best to keep that promise. And today was the culmination of it all, as I pulled into the long, gravel driveway of the Oaks Garden estate. I had to admit, the place was breathtaking. It wasn't a fortress, but a palace. Towering oak trees draped in Spanish moss lined the entrance. Manicured gardens exploded with color. And in the center of it all was a grand, white-pillared mansion that looked like it had been pulled from the pages of a magazine. It should have. It cost enough. I could hear the faint, elegant strains of a string quartet playing as I found a parking spot. The air was warm, filled with the sweet, intoxicating scent of thousands of white roses, roses I knew for a fact had been flown in from Ecuador. I stepped out of the car, grabbing the album, and took a moment to just soak it in. Guests in expensive suits and shimmering dresses drifted across the lawn, champagne flutes in hand. Laughter floated on the breeze. It was perfect. A perfect day for my perfect girl. A small smile touched my lips. Every last dime, I thought, was worth it. I saw her then, standing near the grand entrance to the ballroom. A vision in white. The dress? A delicate cascade of lace and silk that cost more than my first car. Hugged her figure perfectly. She was talking to her new husband, Ethan, and another older couple I recognized as his parents. She was laughing, her head tilted back. The picture of happiness, a wave of pride. So powerful, it almost buckled my knees. Washed over me. That was my daughter. My Olivia. I started walking towards them. The gift held carefully in my hands. I was about 50 feet away when she looked up and our eyes met. Her smile didn't just fade. It froze. It was just for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. The light in her eyes flickered out, replaced by something I couldn't quite name. Panic annoyance. Ethan leaned in and whispered something in her ear, his eyes flicking over to me, then back to her. He put a hand on her arm, a gesture that looked reassuring, but his posture was tense. A knot began to form in the pit of my stomach, but I pushed it down. It was just wedding day jitters. That had to be it. As I got closer, Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Olivia. A subtle but clear barrier. "Mr. Carroll," he said. His smile was wide, but it didn't reach his eyes. They were cold. Assessing. "Good of you to make it." "Ethan," I nodded, trying to peer around him to get a look at my daughter. "Olivia. Honey. You look, wow. Just wow." She wouldn't meet my gaze. Her eyes were fixed on a point just over my shoulder. "Hi. Dad?" Her voice was flat. Empty. The warmth I was so used to was completely gone. "Ooh. I have your gift," I said, lifting the album slightly. "I wanted to give it to you before things got too crazy." "That's very thoughtful." Ethan cut in smoothly. "Why don't you leave it on the gift table just inside? We'll be sure to look at it later." The knot in my stomach tightened. His parents were watching us now, their expressions a polite, unreadable mask. But I could feel their judgment like a physical weight. I just wanted to say hi to my daughter on her wedding day. "Ethan," I said, my voice a little firmer than I intended. I finally made eye contact with Olivia. "Liv, is everything okay?" She finally looked at me, and in her eyes, I saw it. The thing I couldn't name before. It was embarrassment. Shame. She was looking at me. Her father. The man who had raised her. And she was ashamed. She took a small step closer, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. "Dad, I'm sorry," she said. The words precise and sharp, like little shards of glass. "But you can't be here." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The music from the string quartet suddenly sounded jarring, out of tune. What are you talking about, Olivia? This is your wedding." My voice was barely a whisper. "This was a misunderstanding," Ethan added, his voice low and urgent. "We tried to call. This part of the reception, it's just for our closest family and friends. The main party is later." Closest family. The words caught in my throat. I gestured vaguely at the opulent surroundings, at the 100 or so guests mingling on the lawn. I paid for all of this. The venue, the flowers, that $12,000 dress on your back. How am I not closest family? Olivia flinched. She glanced over at Ethan's parents, who were now pretending to be deep in conversation. But their posture was rigid. She leaned in closer. And her next words were the ones that would echo in my head for the rest of my life. Her voice was venomous, laced with a cruelty I had never heard from her before. "This isn't about the money," she hissed. "It's about appearances. You don't fit the picture. Dad, you don't belong with these people. Please, just go. Go before you. Embarrass me any more. Embarrass her. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. A cold, sharp pain radiated through my chest, making it hard to breathe. I looked at my daughter, at her beautiful, perfectly made-up face, and all I could see was a stranger, a cold, cruel stranger wearing Olivia's face. I saw the years of sacrifice, the long hours at work, the missed vacations, the lonely nights after she'd moved out, all of it flashing before my eyes. All of it, so I could give her this perfect day. A perfect day she thought I wasn't good enough to be a part of. Something inside me didn't just break. It shattered. It turned to ice. I looked down at the gift in my hands, at the silver paper that now seemed cheap and foolish. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked over to a small, ornate table by the entrance and gently placed the album down. I didn't look back at her. I couldn't. I walked away. My footsteps echoed loudly on the polished marble floor of the grand foyer. A lonely, rhythmic sound in the vast, open space. Each step felt heavy, like I was wading through cement. The cheerful music and the sound of laughter from the garden followed me, mocking me all the way to the front door. I pushed the heavy oak doors open and stepped out into the warm afternoon sun. It felt like walking out of a movie and into the real world. Only the real world was gray and lifeless. I walked to my car, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, my knuckles white. I got in and just sat there for a long time. The engine off. The silence inside the car. A deafening roar. The pain was still there. A white-hot agony in my chest. But underneath it, something else was beginning to form. A cold, hard resolve. Tears pricked my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. I wiped them away with the back of my hand. My movements jerky and sharp. The man who had walked out of that mansion was not the same man who had walked in. The loving, doting father was gone. In his place was a man who had been pushed too far. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking, but not from shock anymore. It was from adrenaline. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb moving with a purpose I hadn't felt just 10 minutes ago. I bypassed Olivia's name, and Ethan's and all the others. I stopped when I found the name I was looking for, David Chen, Premier Bank. My personal bank manager. My finger hovered over the call button for a single, final heartbeat. Then, I pressed it. The phone rang twice before a familiar, professional voice answered. David Chen. David. It's Carol, I said. My own voice sounded strange to my ears. A low, steady monotone that was a universe away from the earthquake, tearing through my insides. I stared through the windshield at the distant, glittering mansion, using it as an anchor to keep my composure from cracking. Carol, hey. I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. Shouldn't you be dancing at a wedding right now? Congratulations. By the way, I hope Olivia is having the day of her dreams. His cheerful words were like a fist to my gut. The day of her dreams. I had certainly paid for it. Something's come up, I said, my voice flat, cutting through the pleasantries. I need your help with something urgent. I need to stop a payment on a check. There was a brief pause. I could hear the faint, rhythmic clicking of a keyboard on his end, a sound I usually found comforting. The sound of business being done. Now it just sounded like a timer ticking down. Okay, he said, his tone shifting instantly from friendly to all business. A bit last minute. But let's see what we can do. Which one are you looking at? Check number 4071. I said, reading the number from a confirmation email I had saved in a dedicated folder on my phone. Payable to the Oaks Garden Estate. It's for a significant amount. The final balance for the venue. They probably haven't deposited it yet. But they will first thing, Monday morning. Understood, David said. I could picture him in his office. Sharp suit. Focused expression. Consider it done. I'll put an immediate stop on it and flag it in the system. I'll email you the confirmation in a few minutes. Is there anything else? This was the point of no return. I took a slow, deliberate breath. Yes, I said, my eyes fixed on the partygoers who looked like tiny, elegant ants from this distance. Everything else, every payment, every transfer scheduled for today or this upcoming week related to this event. I'm sending you an email right now with a list of vendor names. I want it all frozen, canceled, reversed. If possible. Another pause. This one significantly longer. The keyboard clicking stopped. Carol, forgive me for asking, but are you sure about this? We're talking about a lot of vendors here. Florists, caterers, photographers. This is the entire wedding. Is everything all right? His concern was genuine, and for a moment, it made my resolve waver. But then I saw Olivia's face in my mind's eye, the coldness, the disgust. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I said, and the glacial finality in my voice left no room for further argument. All right, he said softly. Professionally, I'll await your email and handle it from this end. Thank you, David. I ended the call without another word. The first and largest domino had been pushed. Now, it was time to personally make sure the rest would topple. I started the car, not to leave, but to find a better vantage point. I drove a few miles down the road until I found a quiet, shaded spot on the shoulder that still had a clear line of sight to the estate. I pulled over, put the car in park, and took out my phone again. The email to David was already drafted. I hit send. Then I opened another folder. This one labeled Wedding Contacts and IDEM. I started at the top. The florist. A woman named Madeline who had spoken in hushed, reverent tones about the ethereal vision Olivia had for the day. A vision that involved nearly $10,000 worth of peonies and Ecuadorian roses. She answered on the second ring, her voice practically bubbling with manufactured joy. Madeline's blooms. A beautiful day for a beautiful wedding. Madeline, this is Carol, Olivia's father, I said calmly. Oh, Mr. Carol, I hope you're enjoying everything. Isn't it just the most beautiful setup? Olivia's taste is simply exquisite. That floral arch is one of my proudest creations. It is quite something. I agreed, my voice devoid of any warmth. There's been a change of plans regarding the payment structure. I'm calling to inform you that the final payment authorization, which was scheduled for tonight, has been withdrawn. I'd advise you to collect your property from the venue as soon as possible, before the event concludes. The silence on the other end was profound. I could hear her breath hitch. I'm sorry. I don't understand, she stammered. Is something wrong with the arrangements? Did something wilt? The arrangements are fine, I replied. This is not a reflection of your work. It is a financial matter. I am simply the financier. And the financing has been terminated. Thank you for your work up to this point. I hung up before she could formulate another question. Next on the list was the catering manager, a prim Frenchman named Jean-Pierre, whose company charged an obscene amount per plate for miniature food. He was less bubbly, more condescending. Jean-Pierre speaking. "This is Carol, father of the bride at the Spencer wedding." "Ah, yes," he said, a note of impatience in his voice. "Is there an issue with the canapés?" "There is an issue with your final invoice." I corrected him. "It will not be paid. The authorization from my account has been cancelled. Please be advised that any further service you provide will not be compensated from my end." He scoffed. A short, ugly sound. "Monsieur, that is not how this works. We have a contract." "Your contract is with Olivia Spencer," I said, my voice as hard as steel. "The payment arrangement was with me. That arrangement is now void. I suggest you stop serving my food and discuss payment with your client directly." "This is absurd. You will be hearing from our lawyers," he sputtered. "I'm sure I will," I said, and ended the call. One by one, I went down the list. The lead photographer, a young, trendy woman named Chloe. The seven-piece band that specialized in Sinatra covers. The sommelier who had curated the wine pairings. The message was the same for each of them. Polite, professional, unwavering. Their reactions were a spectrum of human emotion, confused, sputtering, indignant anger, panicked, pleading. It didn't matter to me. I was a force of nature. I was the storm that had been brewing for 25 years. And I had finally made landfall. By the time I got to the last name on the list, the baker responsible for the 5-tiered, fondant-covered monstrosity that cost more than my first month's mortgage, my hands were trembling again. I finished the call and dropped the phone onto the passenger seat as if it had burned me. The sun had sunk below the trees, and the inside of my car was cast in a deep, orange glow. The beautiful sunset felt like a mockery. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. The cool plastic, a stark contrast to my burning skin. This wasn't a victory. It didn't feel good. It felt like I was performing surgery on my own heart without anesthesia. A wave of nausea rolled through me. For a moment, a terrible, gut-wrenching doubt crept in. What was I doing? This was my child. My Olivia. I picked up my phone, my thumb swiping through photos out of instinct. I stopped on one from a few months ago, taken at the bridal boutique. Olivia was standing on the little pedestal, beaming in that absurdly expensive dress. I was standing beside her. My own smile so wide, it looked like it might crack my face. I looked so proud, so happy, so naive. I kept scrolling back, past her college graduation, past her 16th birthday, all the way back to a fuzzy photo of her as a little girl, maybe 5 years old, perched on my shoulders at a 4th of July parade. She was holding a tiny American flag, her face alight with pure, uncomplicated joy. Where did that little girl go? When did the joy get replaced by this cold, calculating ambition? When did her father become a stepping stone she was willing to kick away once she reached the other side? The answer was, I didn't know. I had been too busy working, too busy writing checks, too busy trying to build her a perfect world to notice the person she was actually becoming. The sickness in my stomach wasn't just anger anymore. It was grief. I was mourning the loss of a daughter who, I was beginning to realize, I may never have truly known at all. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about a lifetime of taking without gratitude. This was about a fundamental lack of respect, and it had to stop. Here. Now. My resolve hardened once more, turning from icy grief into granite. while I sat there in the growing twilight. The first tremors of what I had done were just beginning to shake the foundations of Olivia's perfect day. Inside the grand ballroom, the manager of the Oaks, a man with a perpetually worried expression named Arthur, was striding purposefully toward Ethan. "Mr. Spencer," Arthur said, his voice low and tight, his hand held up to block the conversation from nearby guests. "I need a word with you. Urgently." Ethan, who was in the middle of a boastful story with his groomsmen, excused himself with a confident, privileged smile. "What can I do for you?" "Arthur, is the champagne not cold enough for your liking? Our accounting department just received an automated alert from our bank," Arthur said, his professional veneer cracking to reveal the panic underneath. "The check for the venue, the final payment, has been stopped. It's been flagged and declined." Ethan's smile vanished. "What? That's impossible. My father-in-law is old school. But he's not an idiot. It must be a bank error." "I certainly hope so," Arthur said, his voice laced with ice. "Because until this is rectified, I cannot authorize the dinner service to begin. My staff is on standby." Just then, the lilting music from the string quartet abruptly screeched to a halt mid-note. One of the violinists had just gotten off a frantic phone call, her face pale. "A moment later?" Two men in uniforms from Madeline's Blooms walked briskly into the ballroom and, without a word to anyone, began to dismantle the enormous, breathtaking floral arch behind the head table. Guests stopped their conversations, their heads turning in unison. A confused, excited murmur rippled through the crowd. This was more entertaining than the planned speeches. Olivia saw it first. Her face, which had been beaming as she accepted congratulations, turned ashen. She rushed over to one of the men, her expensive dress trailing behind her. "What are you doing? Stop! You can't take that down." The man, a burly guy who looked more like a construction worker than a florist, barely looked at her. "Sorry, ma'am. Got a call from the boss. Payment was canceled. We're just collecting our property." That was the moment the dam broke. The caterers, having gotten the word from a panicked Jean-Pierre, stopped circulating with trays of bacon-wrapped scallops and miniature quiches. They retreated to the kitchen doors, standing in a silent, awkward line. The lead singer of the Sinatra cover band, who was just about to start his set, walked to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice echoing in the suddenly quiet room. "Due to unforeseen contractual and logistical issues, the Blue Notes will be concluding our performance for the evening. We thank you for your time and wish the happy couple all the best." He and his band began packing up their instruments with practiced efficiency. The perfect scene, the flawless fantasy that had been so carefully constructed, was crumbling into a public humiliation of epic proportions. Olivia looked around wildly, her eyes landing on Ethan, who was still in a heated, hushed conversation with the venue manager. She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. My phone, sitting silently on the passenger seat, buzzed to life. The screen lit up Olivia. I watched it buzz. The vibration, a frantic, angry insect against the leather. The name that used to fill me with warmth now just looked like a word. I let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, it buzzed again. The lock screen flashed with new messages. Olivia, Dad. Pick up the phone. Olivia, what is going on? People are leaving. The flowers are gone. Olivia, you are doing this. I know it. Call me back now. I ignored them. Back at the wedding turned disaster. Ethan's father. A formidable man with a jaw set like granite pulled his son aside. His face was a thundercloud. "Ethan, what in God's name is going on?" he demanded. His voice a low growl that could curdle milk. "This is a fiasco. Our family, our friends, are all watching this circus. I warned you about her background. It's not about money. It's about class. This is what happens when you ignore that. This reflects on us. What kind of family did you marry into?" I don't know," Ethan stammered, his earlier confidence completely gone, replaced by the terrified look of a schoolboy being dressed down by the headmaster. "It's her father. He was here. And Olivia, she asked him to leave. He must be doing this. This is a disgrace," his father said, his eyes cold with fury. Fix it, or we will." Olivia, overhearing this, felt a new wave of hot, desperate rage wash over her shame. This wasn't her fault. It couldn't be. It was his. Her father's. He was ruining everything because he was selfish. He couldn't stand that she had something beautiful that he wasn't the center of. She turned to Ethan, her face streaked with tears, her eyes blazing. "This is my father's fault," she shrieked, no longer caring who heard her. The guests fell into a stunned silence. "He's doing this to punish me." "Well, I'll show him. I'll show the whole world what a cruel, manipulative monster he really is." My phone buzzed for what must have been the 17th time. It wouldn't stop. This time, I picked it up. I let it ring once more. A final moment of quiet before the inevitable explosion. Then I swiped to answer. I didn't say a word. I just held the phone to my ear and listened to the sound of my creation. The voice that came through the speaker was barely recognizable. It was a raw, hysterical scream, filled with the fury of a spoiled child who had just had her favorite toy taken away. "Dad, what did you do? You ruined everything. You ruined my wedding. My one day, the one perfect day of my life. The Spencers think we're trash. Everyone is leaving. Why would you do this to me?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, letting the torrent of accusations wash over me without effect. She wasn't asking for an explanation. She wasn't sorry. She was demanding that I absorb her rage and fix what she had broken. When she finally paused, her breath coming in ragged, sobbing gasps, I brought the phone back to my lips. My voice was quiet, calm, and as cold as the bottom of a grave. "Everything. No. Olivia," I said slowly, deliberately, savoring each word. I only took back what was mine. "Your party is over." And then I hung up, plunging her into a silence more profound than any of her screams. I turned off the phone completely, tossed it onto the passenger seat, and finally put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving the flickering lights of her ruined palace behind me in the rearview mirror until they were nothing but a faint, distant glow. The drive home was the quietest hour of my life. The engine of my old Ford hummed a familiar, steady tune, a sound that had been the backdrop to 1,000 commutes. But tonight it felt alien. The silence in the car wasn't peaceful. It was a vacuum, a void left behind by the emotional supernova that had just occurred. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't check my phone, which remained off. A dark, inert rectangle on the passenger seat. I just drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2, my eyes fixed on the white lines of the highway as they appeared and disappeared under my headlights. Each mile that passed put more physical distance between me and the wreckage of the wedding. But I couldn't escape the images replaying in my mind. Olivia's face, contorted with a rage I'd never seen. The sight of the florists methodically stripping away the beauty I had paid for, the stunned, whispering faces of the guests, and her voice on the phone, a shriek of pure, undiluted entitlement. I had expected to feel a sense of grim satisfaction, the cold comfort of justice served, but there was none. There was only a hollow, aching emptiness. I had won the battle, but in doing so, I had officially lost my daughter. I pulled into my driveway. The house dark and silent. It had felt empty ever since Olivia moved out a few years ago. But tonight the emptiness was a palpable presence. It had teeth. I walked inside, dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door. A goofy thing. Olivia had made me in a pottery class when she was 9 and went straight to my office. It was a small room, meticulously organized. The one space in the house that was truly mine. On the wall was a framed photo of a 5-year-old Olivia on my shoulders at a 4th of July parade. I stared at it for a long moment before turning my back on it and sitting down at my desk. Sleep was an impossibility, so I waited. I knew what was coming next. Olivia had promised it. She was going to show the world what a monster I was. The next morning, I allowed myself the simple routine of making coffee before I faced the inevitable. I turned my phone on as the coffee brewed, and the device immediately began to convulse, buzzing and pinging with a storm of notifications that had been dammed up all night. Dozens of missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably wedding guests or angry vendors, and over 100 text messages. I ignored them all and opened my laptop, navigating to Facebook. It was the first thing on my feed. Olivia had posted it just after midnight. It was a professionally taken photo, one of the engagement pictures I'd paid for, of her and Ethan, looking windswept and romantic on a beach. They looked like a magazine ad for a perfect life, but it was the caption underneath that was the real piece of work. It was a masterpiece of performative victimhood. My heart is shattered into a million pieces. It began. Last night was supposed to be the happiest night of our lives. Instead, it became a nightmare. For years, I have silently endured a relationship with my father that was built not on love, but on control. He used his money as a weapon, a tool to ensure my life followed the path he designed for it. When I finally found a man who loves me for me, and when we tried to have a day that was truly ours, he couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand not being the center of attention. He gave us an ultimatum, and when we chose each other, he chose to punish us in the most cruel and public way imaginable. He destroyed our wedding. He left us humiliated and heartbroken. We are sharing this painful story because we want others who suffer from financial and emotional abuse to know that they are not alone. Thank you to our real friends and family for the love you've shown. We will get through this. It was brilliant, in a sickening sort of way. It painted her as a brave survivor and me as a petty person. Abusive tirant. Ethan had shared it moments later, adding his own sanctimonious caption, "I am in awe of my wife's strength. I will stand by her as she heals from a lifetime of manipulation. True love will always win." The comments section was exactly what they'd hoped for, a tidal wave of sympathy and outrage on their behalf. Olivia, I am so sorry this happened to you. Stay strong, from one of her sorority sisters. This is disgusting behavior from a parent. Sending you both so much love. From a distant cousin, Ethan. You're a real man for standing up for her. From one of his groomsmen. My name was being dragged through the mud by people who had known me for years. People who had eaten at my dinner table. They saw a picture and a well-crafted story and accepted it as gospel. I took a slow sip of my coffee. The liquid was hot and bitter. A perfect match for the taste in my mouth. They had fired the first shot. It was a good one. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed I was unarmed. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and went back to my office. I didn't feel angry anymore. The time for that was over. Now, I felt a kind of surgical calm. I opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, the one with the heavy-duty lock. Inside were 24 neatly labeled accordion files, one for every year since Olivia was born. Inside each were the major financial documents for that year: bank statements, tuition payment confirmations, receipts for cars, down payments for apartments, credit card statements detailing trips and shopping sprees. I was a meticulous man by trade. It was a habit that had served me well. I spent the next 2 hours scanning documents. I created a new folder on my desktop, naming it simply, The Truth. Finally, I went to the old wooden chest in the corner of my office. I lifted the heavy lid, the scent of cedar and old paper filling the room. Under a pile of Olivia's old report cards and art projects was the thing I was looking for: a thick, leather-bound ledger, its cover worn soft with time. On the front, embossed in faded gold leaf, were the words, "For Olivia's future." I opened it to the first page. My own handwriting, younger and neater, detailed the first deposit into her college savings account, made the week she was born. I'd made notes in the margins over the years. First tooth came in today, she said. Dada started kindergarten. She was so brave. It was more than a financial record. It was the story of my love for her, written in dollars and cents. I took out my phone and snapped a clear, high-resolution photo of that first page. This wasn't just about numbers. It was about intent. With my arsenal assembled, I went back to Facebook. I didn't comment on her post. I didn't engage with the haters. I created a new post of my own. I chose not to include a photo of myself. I wanted the words and the evidence to speak for themselves. My tone was not emotional. It was not angry. It was the tone I used when presenting a project summary to a board of directors: factual, direct, and irrefutable. In light of a recent public post made by my daughter, Olivia, and her husband, Ethan, I feel compelled to provide some clarity and context. I began. I have never believed that a parent's love should be transactional. I do, however, believe it deserves the basic decency of respect. My daughter accused me of using money to control her. Here are the facts of that control over the past 25 years. Then, I laid it all out in a simple, bulleted list. Education, full tuition, room, and board for a 4-year private university. Total $250. Ling, housing security deposit, and first 6 months' rent on her first 2 post-college apartments. Total $50. Ling, transportation, a brand new BMW 3 Series for her 21st birthday. Total $45. Ling, lifestyle multiple, fully funded international trips, Europe, Southeast Asia, a consistent monthly allowance until the age of 24, and access to a credit card for emergencies that was frequently used for designer clothes and high-end restaurants. Estimated total, 150. Ling Jia. The wedding, the full, itemized cost of the event she described as truly ours. Total sum. Ling. I didn't include the small things. The thousands of dinners, phone bills, and shopping trips. I just stuck to the big, undeniable numbers. The grand total of this financial abuse comes to approximately $980. Ling. I wrote, "This money was given freely. With love." It was the fulfillment of a promise I made to her mother that our daughter would want for nothing. I have never, in her entire life, asked for anything in return until her wedding day. On that day, after paying for the entire event, I was told by my daughter that I did not fit the picture and was asked to leave before I could embarrass her. It was at that moment, and only at that moment, that my financial support ended. I concluded the post with a simple, devastating question. I gave my daughter $1 million life. All I asked for in return was to be treated with respect at her wedding. You, the public, can now be the judge of whether that was too much to ask. And then, I attached the evidence. A dozen of the clearest and most damning documents, the university tuition summary, the wire transfer for the apartment, the bill of sale for the BMW, and as the final, crowning piece, the photo of the first page of my old ledger for Olivia's future. I hit post, and then I closed the laptop. For a few hours, there was silence. Then, my phone began to buzz. Not with angry calls, but with a different kind of notification. Friends, old colleagues, even neighbors, were sending me private messages. "Carol, I am so sorry. I knew there had to be more to the story. You are a good man." By midday, the tide hadn't just turned, it had become a tsunami. My post was being shared exponentially. People were tagging Olivia and Ethan in it. The comments on their original post began to change. The messages of sympathy were drowned out by a chorus of outrage. Wow. Just wow. The definition of an ungrateful brat. She got a BMW and had the nerve to call her dad controlling, "I got a bus pass." At Ethan Spencer, "You married a grifter." My dude. Good luck with that. Olivia and Ethan started deleting the negative comments. But they were coming in too fast. For every one they deleted, 10 more appeared. It was like trying to stop the ocean with a bucket. Then, people started noticing the comments were being deleted, which only added fuel to the fire. By the evening, the fallout had moved from public to private. A message popped up on my phone from a cousin of mine in Ohio, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. She was a bit of a busybody, but her heart was usually in the right place. "Carol," her text read, "I saw what Olivia posted and what you posted. While I don't think family business should be aired out in public like this, I just want you to know that I understand. You did what you had to do." It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but it was a crack in the wall of family judgment I had expected. It was a small validation that I wasn't the monster they'd tried to make me out to be. I replied with a simple, "Thank you, Linda. I appreciate that." For Olivia, however, the messages were of a different nature. One of her bridesmaids sent her a screenshot of my post. "Liv, is this true?" was all it said. Olivia didn't reply. An hour later, that same bridesmaid quietly removed herself from Olivia's bridal party group chat. Another friend, who had been one of the most vocal supporters on her initial post, deleted her comment without a word. The social fortress they had built was crumbling from the inside out. Their phones, which had been buzzing with support, grew quiet. The silence of friends who suddenly have nothing to say is the loudest sound in the world. The final, fatal blow didn't come from a stranger on the internet or a fickle friend. It came from the one place Olivia had been so desperate to impress. Ethan's phone rang late that night. He was sitting on the edge of a bed in a sterile, overpriced hotel room, staring at the wall. Olivia was curled in a fetal position on the other side of the bed. Her perfect wedding makeup, now a mess of black streaks on the white pillowcase. He saw the caller ID and his blood ran cold. It was his father. He answered, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad." I wasn't there. Of course. But I could imagine the conversation. I could hear the cold, controlled fury in the older man's voice. A man who valued reputation and legacy above all else. He would have seen my post. He would have seen the irrefutable evidence. He wouldn't have seen a family squabble. He would have seen a catastrophic business merger with a fraudulent partner. He would have seen his family name being attached to a viral story about a spoiled, ungrateful liar. Ethan was silent for a long time, just listening, his face growing paler with every word his father spoke. Finally, he said, "Yes, sire, I understand." He hung up the phone and placed it carefully on the nightstand. He didn't look angry. He didn't look sad. He looked empty. He stood up and looked down at the weeping figure of his wife of less than 48 hours. His bride, his partner, the woman he was supposed to love and protect. But the look in his eyes held no love. There was no compassion. There was only the cold, hard calculation of a man cutting his losses. The fairy tale was over. The marriage was dead. All that was left was the damage control. The week that followed was one of the strangest of my life. After the initial explosion online, a profound and unsettling quiet descended. My phone stopped buzzing with messages from concerned friends and furious strangers. The story, having reached its peak of viral intensity, was quickly replaced by the next day's outrage. The internet's short attention span moving on. The silence was a relief, but it was also heavy, thick with unspoken words and unresolved endings. I went back to work. I visited job sites, reviewed blueprints, and sat in meetings, my mind a million miles away. My colleagues were tactful. They had all seen the posts. Of course it was impossible to miss, but no one mentioned it. They treated me with a gentle, careful respect, as if I were recovering from a long illness. In a way, I was. In the quiet evenings, I would find myself wandering through the house, a ghost in my own life. I'd stand in the doorway of Olivia's old room, which I had kept exactly as she'd left it. A perfect time capsule of the girl she used to be. A part of me expected the phone to ring, to hear her voice, perhaps with a reluctant apology, a first step. But the phone remained silent. I learned through the grapevine, a text from my cousin Linda, that Ethan had filed for an annulment, citing fraud. His family's lawyers were notoriously efficient and ruthless. The marriage, for all intents and purposes, had never existed. I didn't feel victorious. There was no triumphant satisfaction in knowing I had been proven right. There was just a deep, cavernous ache. I had exposed the truth. But the truth was that my daughter had become someone I didn't recognize, and I had been forced to sever a part of myself to stop the damage. I felt like a surgeon who had successfully removed a tumor, but was left with a gaping, painful wound where it used to be. The anger had burned itself out completely, leaving behind only the ash of grief and a fragile, uncertain peace. Then, exactly 1 week after the wedding that wasn't, on a quiet Saturday afternoon as I was trying to lose myself in a crossword puzzle, my phone finally rang. The number was unfamiliar, a prepaid local exchange I didn't recognize. My heart gave a painful lurch. I knew, with a certainty that was absolute, who it was. I let it ring 3 times, my hand hovering over the screen, before I took a deep breath and answered, "End of the lay forhiv." "Hello." For a moment, there was only silence, punctuated by a ragged, watery sound, like someone trying to breathe through tears. Then, a voice, so broken and small it was almost a whisper, came through the speaker. "Dad." It was Olivia. But it wasn't the voice I had heard a week ago, the voice filled with hysterical rage and accusation. This was the voice of a child who had been lost in the woods for a very long time. "It's me," she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a rush of air and misery. I'm so sorry." I didn't say anything. I just listened, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. "You were right," she continued, her voice cracking on every word. "You were right about everything. I was so awful, so selfish. I don't know why. I don't know who I became." She started to cry in earnest then, not the performative sobs of a manipulator, but the raw, ugly, soul-deep crying of someone who has hit the absolute bottom and found it harder and more unforgiving than they could have ever imagined. I could hear the sterile, empty acoustics of a cheap room around her, the faint hum of a mini-fridge, the distant sound of traffic. "He left me. Dad," she whispered. "Ethan." His father called the landlord of the apartment, the one his company was paying for. They gave me 24 hours to get out. My keycards were deactivated. I had to pack a suitcase while a security guard watched me. My friends won't answer my calls. The ones who do they make excuses. I have nothing. I'm in a motel off the highway. I have $43 left. Each word was a confession, a stripping away of the layers of pride and delusion she had wrapped herself in for years. This was the unvarnished truth of her situation, and she was finally admitting it, first to herself, and now to me. "I was so scared," she said, her voice dropping even lower, as if sharing a shameful secret. "I was so scared of his family. They're so perfect, so polished. They have this way of looking at you that just makes you feel small, like you're a bug. And you," she took a shuddering breath, "you were a reminder of where I came from. You're a good man, a hard-working man. But you weren't like them, and I was ashamed of that. I was so stupidly, horribly ashamed. And I took it out on you. I treated you like a wallet, like an ATM, not like my father. And I am so sorry." There it was, the truth, the admission I had longed to hear for years, delivered not with grace or dignity, but from a place of total desperation. I closed my eyes. The anger I had held onto for so long was completely gone, washed away by the tide of her broken words. In its place was an immense, profound sadness, a sadness for the little girl in the pigtails, for the proud college graduate, and for the cold, frightened stranger she had become. I finally let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for my entire life. The tension in my shoulders, a knot I had carried for years, finally began to unwind. "I hear you, Olivia," I said, my voice hoarse. "I hear you." Can you help me?" she asked. The question so small and fragile, I could barely hear it. "I don't know what else to do. I have nowhere else to go." Here it was, the crossroads, the old me. The Carol from 2 weeks ago would have already been in the car, driving to her, ready to write a check and solve all her problems. ready to put her back on the pedestal she had just fallen from. But that man was gone. He had died on the marble floor of that wedding reception. An apology is a start. Olivia, I said, my voice gentle but firm. It's an important start. But trust and respect, those are things that have to be earned back over a very long time. You can't fix this with one phone call. I know, she whispered. I know that. I'm not asking you to. I don't want to sleep in my car tonight. I looked around my quiet, comfortable office. I thought about the $43 she had to her name. She had made her bed. And it was a hard one. But my goal was never to destroy her. It was to teach her. The lesson wasn't over yet. All right, I said, making a decision. This is what I'm going to do. I will wire $1,000 to the front desk of your motel. That should be enough to cover your room for another week. And give you a little left over for food. A wave of audible relief came through the phone. A soft sob. Oh, thank you. Dad, thank you so much. I'm not finished. I cut in, my tone leaving no room for misunderstanding. This is not a gift. It is an investment in your potential to become a responsible adult, and it comes with conditions. 2 of them. They are not negotiable. She was silent, waiting. First, I said, by the end of this week, you need to have a job. I don't care if it's waiting tables or folding sweaters at the mall or answering phones. I don't care what it pays. You need to get a job. And you need to show me your first pay stub. Second, you will find your own place to live. A room for rent. A small studio apartment. Whatever you can afford with the money you earn. You will not be moving back here. You will not be getting another allowance. This is it. This is your one and only chance to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. The silence on the other end stretched for a long time. I could hear her processing it. It wasn't the rescue she had probably hoped for. It was a lifeline. But it was attached to a ladder she had to climb herself. Finally, her voice came back. Thick with tears, but with a new note in it. Not defiance. Not manipulation. It sounded, for the first time in a very long time, like acceptance. Okay, Dad, she whispered. Okay, I'll do it. She sniffled. And thank you. Really, thank you. It was the most sincere thing she had said to me in a decade. You don't deserve it. Olivia, I said softly, the words both harsh and kind. But everyone deserves a chance to become a better person. I paused. I'll make the transfer now. Goodbye. I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. I sat there in the silence of my office. The late afternoon sun streaming through the window. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt calm. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't realized I'd lost hope. I looked at the picture on the wall. The little girl on my shoulders. Her face so full of light. That girl was gone. Maybe forever. Our old relationship, built on a foundation of my sacrifice and her acceptance, was shattered beyond repair. But maybe, just maybe, from these ruins, something new could be built. Something more honest. Something more real. I didn't know if I could ever love the woman on the phone the same way I loved the little girl in the picture. But I hoped that one day I could respect her. And for now, that was enough.